Hi, and welcome to Sustainability Explored, a podcast on sustainability and innovation in business and economy, a safe and friendly place to learn more about sustainability across industries. My name is Anna, and I am the podcast host of this show. Every week I invite one professional in the field to share groundbreaking ideas on sustainability in certain sphere, shed light on complicated concepts and give some guidance on how to actually implement sustainability. This is episode number 25, it's the start of season 3, and today we have a, so to say, impactful discussion coming up with Giovanna Jagger, a CEO of Panoptic Global Solutions, co-founder and head of business development at Wokeup. This is a social media that brings together on a single platform the people, organizations, financial resources, data and intelligence to work together towards 17 sustainable development goals of the United Nations. And she is also acting as an ambassador for meaningful business. Why impactful? Because today we're gonna talk about how companies grow and cultivate the culture of long-lasting impact and purpose, how to integrate the sustainability strategy and what role the leadership has to play in it. Giovanna says that every company she has ever worked with wants to grow, to make a positive impact and leave a legacy. Over the years, she has designed business development strategies that help organizations, no matter their size, to grow ethically and sustainably. And when she develops these strategies, she looks at the most cost-effective way to grow and always looks to ensure that purpose is a key aspect of everything we do. Giovanna, as a strong sustainability leader, believes and values collaboration, as she is a strong advocate of giving as many people as possible the opportunity to learn, grow, and develop. I'm very excited and happy to interview Giovanna today. Join this audio journey of ours and let's get it started. There we go. So, hi Giovanna, super happy
Hello.
to have you on my podcast today. So as you know, today we're talking about strategy, positive impact in the corporation, and sustainability integration in the business processes. So I checked your LinkedIn profile. I know that you are currently involved in, correct me if I'm wrong, 3 positions. You are the CEO of Panoptic Global Solutions, a head of business operations at the Wokeup platform. We'll get to that in a second. And no, even more, ambassador for meaningful business and Women to Watch 2020. Throughout your career and in your bio, I read that you are very much about impact and purpose in business and sustainability and corporate social responsibility. How did you find your purpose? Was it something you studied? Was it some event that influenced you and your career choice? And what is your why in sustainability?
Absolutely. Just one small correction about my role within Wokeup is the head of business development, because we do have a head of business in operations. So it was mentioning that. So how I became more involved and interested in what impact and purpose means is I started working in CSR while looking at data through CSR platforms, and really I came from the tech and reporting side of things, if you like. And I started to realize the importance of data to be able to demonstrate impact indeed, and to also turn that into a business case so the leadership would acknowledge the need for those projects to exist as part of the business structure and the business strategy overall, but also what that represented in terms of giving back to society. And that included obviously the employees, which turned into, in return, that look like a positive staff retention level, and also looking at the perception that the society had on that brand as such. And my interest really started to grow as I became more and more involved in working with different businesses, as I met them in different parts of the journey, and to understand the desire and the intent they had to really, really impact the life of people. So when I got that close to the detail, I understood what it actually meant, the term of beneficiary meant. If you haven't worked in corporate responsibility, you see that sort of things as something that normally relates to perhaps volunteer or giving. And it seems like a distant thing from you. It looks like a story that it has nothing to do with you. Perhaps you see an ad, perhaps you hear stories, but you don't feel very close to it. But once you start to get close to CSR, you realize that not only do you need to help organizations to do that well, so it impacts more beneficiaries, but also to take other stakeholders through that journey. So they also realize that all of this approaching corporate responsibility is actually social responsibility and impact, and we can all be part of that journey.
Right. What kind do you think of role the top management of the company has to play in it? Do you have to convince anyone to implement the corporate social responsibility actions? Do they maybe go after you? Because in my career, I had polarly different approaches, and I had to fight, to let me do something positive, while the top management was saying, no, like, relax, we don't need it. We are not about that.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, because I started my career in CSR through CSR platforms and SaaS, which involved the sales process of the sales part of that, which meant I had to go and convince people to buy a product that would help them demonstrate to everybody how good they are doing good. Interestingly, what I found is I started to look at things from the other side. Rather than me going in as a potential supplier and saying, this is going to help you, I started to develop a different approach to it and started to listen more to the leaders and the leadership of organizations, and realized that we look at organizations in big brands especially the same way we look at the government. We expect them to resolve a lot of our problems because they have we assume they have the ability to give, they should give, and the bigger they are, the more we expect from them. But I heard someone give a testimonial as part of a panel, and they represent a really, really well-known financial institution globally. And one of the things that they said as a kind of a comment, they said, yes, we are a bank, but we don't have money to give away. And I understood that, and I got it. It kind of sank in, and I thought, we need to help them as much as we want them to help society. We in the CSR community need to take responsibility to understand what part of the journey they're at, to be able to find the solution that will fit that, that specific case, and then work with them. If that looks like a consultant or a CSR platform or a strategy or anything else, then we should be able to work, to play that part with them and then help them. So to answer your question, have I had to be part of perhaps convince the leadership to come on board with the CSR teams? Yes, up to a level, but at the same time, I've had to turn around and say, actually, we also need to listen to them and see what pressures are there on there where we can help them too.
Right. Listen to their pain, right? And understand what pains them. Speaking of the bank or the examples that you mentioned now, like we don't have any spare money. Are there any ways except for money, maybe time, volunteering time, or share with me some interesting examples from your experience of the CSR activities implemented with the businesses you work with?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because the most traditional way of giving back to society has always been assumed to be give back through charity giving, or invest in some sort of projects where they perceive they will be giving back as such. But in reality, what we need to look at is the most efficient and cost-effective way to give back to society has to be where everybody benefits. If you look at the UN Sustainable Goals, one of the important, the premises of it is that we need to have a society that has enough to give. So we all have to look at that as in a responsible manner. So there's a couple of organizations that I've had contact with in the last 10 years that I have come to terms with one simple fact. When they set up volunteering initiatives for the staff, and they therefore start to work with non-profits to come and offer those opportunities for the staff to volunteer, more often than not, their staff, the more they have, this happens more often, they think, okay, this is an opportunity for me to volunteer, but I'm actually not aligned to that charity. I'd rather have my time, given to a charity that matters to me. So they want that process to be more personal, more personalized as well. So what I like the approach they're taking, where they've recognized this is more, this will be more valuable if we were to utilize the existing skills, whether it's professional skills or give your time rather than money. So there's a number of potential ways to do that. I believe that there isn't a wrong way and a right way. I think the organizations and nonprofits have to work together to be able to assess what would work best for everyone. And for that to happen, you need to take the real community approach, the real SDG 17 approach, where everybody assesses what they're good at, where is that they have capacity, and then give in that way.
Mm-hmm. That brings me to the next question. Is Wokeup platform, I know we will be talking about that in detail in the next episode, a small teaser to the listeners, for the listeners.
Sure.
But the question is, how do you connect the needs of one party, imaginary, we don't know which one, and what other party can give? Let's say a bank. And let's say not money, but time and professional skills of the bank employee. How do you connect it to some other party? Is the platform that you set up recently and launched, the Wokeup, is some kind of that platform, or how does it work?
So Wokeup, I'll give you a background on Wokeup as a tool, as an answer to a lot of issues that we've had in the corporate and social responsibility area. But also the second part of that question is really, what's the best way to approach need and resource? I would suggest that need and resource will be able to be much better when people listen to each other. Now, if you think about the process in you've got the corporates creating a strategy for corporate responsibility where they really do want to give back, and they can be very, very creative in that sense. And therefore, they will be reaching out to nonprofits that can align themselves to that strategy. And what now we all have in common is the UN SDGs. So if we park that for a second and look at the UN SDGs and the different stakeholders that are participants in who can create impact and deliver towards those SDGs, the answer to that is every single human being on the planet, whether they're a corporate, individual, NGO, everybody can contribute towards the SDGs. I think the answer to both would be is when people realize that they don't have to depend on either NGOs or nonprofits or other organizations or the corporates or the employers. They don't have to depend on anyone if they want to give back to society. I think the current climate that we're living demonstrates that, because imagine if the community where we all live waited until someone came and organized them to help each other. How long would that take? It would be absurd. Now, there is an aspect of the need to scale that up. So if you look at how Wokeup works, Wokeup has been built as a social media platform purposely. And the reason for that is that our CEO, Tisa coming up there, has a very clear vision of why there is a need to have a social media platform that has a completely different approach to how we live our lives. And we always talk about the past 10 years being a selfie decade, where we look at, we want to demonstrate how much we do, how much we have, what we eat, what we share, and that's perfectly fine. But there's an aspect from human nature that wants to give back, and it's the causes that are in our heart that are the ones we want to start to give a space and environment for people to do that in Wokeup. So Wokeup, if you align it with what we're discussing, which is how do we match resource and need, is precisely through that platform where people come together and discuss those important matters. So nonprofits will be able to say, we need help with this. Individuals will would say the same thing, and then others will respond with the answer of, I can help you with this. And then we start to collaborate and build that society differently. I know it's a very ambitious goal, but I don't think it's impossible, especially in the light of what we're seeing now.
Right. In one of your recent articles on LinkedIn, I read you say we need a very strong economy for CSR working for all, for the CSR to work for all. Now, obviously, for obvious reasons, many states are in lockdown, the coronavirus is walking freely, and that drags economy down pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
my question is, CSR as I see it from where I am sitting in Ukraine has been kind of a luxury toy to play. There is business, and we're big guys, we're making money. CSR is for if you have an excess of your resource, and if you want to to look better, to enhance your reputation. It's not obligatory as far as I know anywhere. So it's a fun thing to have, a nice thing to spare with the society. So only those businesses that had the luxury to place themselves in this A league of CSR active and responsible players of the market. With what is happening now and how actively hour by hour the situation changes, how do you project in the future the CSR? Will it get stronger? Will the businesses change maybe their mentality and think more of it, or will it still be a luxury thing to play with, and more and more businesses will get stringy about that, like, no, we're not giving?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, given that we're all looking at how the entire situation is going to impact the economy. And I do believe that whether it's this or any other situation, there is something that has happened without anybody teaching people how to react to this, is the incredibly rapid response in building communities to try and support each other. And I have seen responses from large businesses that I didn't expect, which I find incredibly positive. I've also seen some other organizations that are continuing to advertise their services and products like nothing is happening. I do not know why that happened. I wouldn't dare to say I know what's going to happen in the next hour, the next 10 years, but I do believe that every day we have a choice on how we react to a situation. I think that you're right in saying that in the past decade, perhaps CSR has been seen as a luxury, or and something that is more related to marketing, PR, and communications that you can leave or take. If you took looking at the communications piece, of course, it probably was considered a luxury. But now, if you look at the true meaning of corporate and social responsibility, it really does call for all organizations, no matter what size, to realize that without people, their businesses won't go anywhere. So that they have a responsibility to give back to society. In case of emergencies like this, in situations where we're under stress as globally, as everybody's going through all this, it is when we look at what do we have to give. And let's just break that down into a bit more specific case. If a family of 4 have enough to eat for a week together, and then a family of 2 come at the door and say, can you help us? That's when you make the choice. Who will eat from what you have to offer? Will you share or will you not? And that will determine how long that goes on for. Thankfully, we're not at that point, and it's difficult to say what that would look like if it happened. But at the moment, right now where we are, what we need to do is reassess where we are as communities. I believe so anyway, and look at what does it mean for an organization to give back. And someone actually said in the last week, we look back at how much community has done for us, and it's time to give back. So giving back responsibly is part of exactly the point I made in my article, which is if you give back responsibly, you will maintain a balance. If you give back what you don't have, then you're not maintaining a balance. If you give back more because you want to demonstrate that you're giving more, then you're definitely not maintaining a balance. Not giving anything back is just as negative. So I think giving responsibly is just the bigger part as the entire concept of corporate responsibility, as living a sustainable life in essence.
Right. It's like in the aircraft, first put a mask on yourself, then help a child or a neighbor.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
You keep saying give back responsibly, but to give back responsibly and meaningfully, one has to have at least some sort of a strategy. Without going in extremes, you have a lot of experience in drafting the strategies for organizations, in the sustainability strategies. What would you say are the main starting points and the main key components of a good strategy? Where to look at, who to talk to in the organization to make it solid, meaningful, and sustainable, and applicable also.
Yeah, interestingly, the way I learned how to produce a strong strategy for sustainability or social impact of volunteering has very much come from how a platform works. So a tech solution doesn't work if you don't have certain aspects of it in it to be able to come to life as such and then produce good and strong reports. If you look at how I think a strategy should be built, you need to look at the areas you want to impact, which in a platform are called regions or a business unit or whatever structure you have in there. Then you've got your user levels. So understanding roles and responsibilities within that strategy and who is meant to do what. So when people assume those roles and responsibilities, then they know their own and manage their own timelines and expectations in data responsibility. So that means that within a strategy, you can do exactly the same thing. Is everyone in a team has something to do, they need to deliver for that to happen. So that's taking responsibility. And then of course you have the indicators, which are the aspects that are the goals and the targets. So if you are all aiming at reducing hunger, then we're all going to be working towards those goals. And then if we break it down into what that means in terms of indicators and more granular data, it's exactly the same in a strategy. We all need to have a clear understanding of that and how that complements, it becomes a whole deliverable, a package as such, is when you have a clear view of how you're going to communicate that. Because if you don't tell anybody how all the good you're doing, you might as well have a diamond under the table constantly. No one can see it, no one's going to appreciate it, no one's going to value it, and no one's going to think it's a good idea to have it. And diamond is probably not a good example right now, but thinking about that communication piece is important because then you start to demonstrate to the world what you're doing. And that is not an approach where you want to tell the world how good you are. What you're doing is taking the next step in leadership. If you do need to lead by example as an organization, and you want to demonstrate to the world how is it possible to do that through your reporting and your communication piece. And for that to work, if we look back at how I described, the components need to be there.
Mm-hmm. Is one CSR specialist or sustainability specialist in the organization enough, or there must be a team of them? How to make them work together then?
Yeah, I don't think there's such a thing as one person team, because first of all, just logic tells you can't audit your own work. You don't know when you're making a mistake, especially if you're caught in a situation where you're constantly reviewing the same data time and time again or strategy. I think a teamwork comes as a massive part of for this to be successful. If someone said to me, describe your dream team for a corporate responsibility strategy, there's even an aspect of inviting external stakeholders that will bring a different perception of the requirements and the needs from beneficiaries, from perception, from competitors, and otherwise, how can you benchmark as well what you're doing? So I've worked with CSR teams that were a team of one. I've seen the pressure they're under. I've seen the lack of support and budget that they had, and they delivered the best they could. And that's probably what drew me closer to the CSR teams as individuals. And I started to get I'm very fond of people that work in CSR because of that passion they have. But they're not superhumans. They have to have help. They have to have a couple of eyes that audit what they're doing so they can deliver something positive. So I guess the short answer is definitely no. You can't have one person doing that. That seems difficult. If you look at the way I set up an Optic Global Solutions, my consultancy, I could have done a lot of the work myself for a number of reasons. But the reality is I don't want to. I want people to help me and complement me and sometimes correct me.
Right. How big is your team?
So within the Optic Global Solutions, we don't have employees as such. We work with collaborators. And these collaborators are associate consultants or partners. So for example, the consultancy that we partner from Switzerland has a very specific knowledge in certain projects that they worked on within Europe and Latin America. one of our associate consultant in the UK actually comes from Spain, and he has a very specific, very strong knowledge on human rights and women rights. So things that I recognize that I wish I had lived a longer life, and I wish I'd spent more time in CSR so I could enhance my knowledge, which I'm constantly doing. But even if I did that and dedicated myself to academia, I wouldn't be able to cover all the aspects that my colleagues do. And therefore, together, we're stronger and we can take better solutions to corporates and other organizations.
Right. Together we are stronger. I saw it on your profile.
Correct.
Made me think
Yeah,
of
I firmly believe that.
yeah, made me think of together we never walk alone. Speaking
Yeah,
of the
true.
impact, how do you measure impact? Is it even possible to set KPIs? And sustainability for you, is it an exact science like math or a more creative one?
I think it's a mixture of a very robust data that is necessary. I work with the most sophisticated platform I've ever worked with, had a really good framework to be able to measure impact. And I thought that was very, very successful. I saw a couple of very good examples of what that looks like. But when you scale a project and you have, rather than 10 beneficiaries, you have 1,000, you start to change the way you measure impact, and you do have to become creative. And depending on whether you want to look at quantitative or qualitative data, you can represent that in a number of ways. All of that can be channeled through a slightly different approach, which I've discovered recently through working with a potential partner that is coming to talk to us about how to deliver that to a different organization, and is capturing a number of stories and turning that into short videos where people can actually hear the voices of individuals in terms of impact. And we're not looking at following someone in terms of from the day they were born to the day they passed away. It's not that sort of story. It's about why would an organization that has given time or money or whatever the project is, would life. Sometimes we look at it as a very complicated, mysterious thing, but if you actually listen to the beneficiaries, is where I've realized there's the impact story, and that's the one that should be told time and time again. There is a very lovely example that I saw for Change Now, or Change, I think it's called Change Now. Yes, Change Now, the organization that brings people from the streets, so homeless people, and they give them opportunities to become baristas. Now, that to me is impact, demonstrated very easily, captured in a very simple way, and it touched me. It moved me so much that I thought I need to do something for this organization because they're really making a difference. And if you think about who they've impacted, yes, the homeless person that now has a different life, but it's impacted me. It's changed me. It made me think about all the stakeholders differently.
Right. Speaking of the impact and the culture of impact and purpose in the organization, where does it start? Does it start with the top management? Can it be started with some random employee on one of the lowest positions in the company? Is it a PR and marketing department that is cultivating the culture of impact? What is it from your experience?
Yeah, I think, and I said this humbly, I really believe that it's everybody's responsibility to be corporate, to have that corporate responsibility and social impact and social responsibility in them. And I believe that begins with the day you realize that you are more fortunate than others. So as an employee of businesses that I have been in the past, and as a consultant right now, I can say to you that I probably have had more opportunities than other people, and therefore I should look and figure out the way to give back. Now, when you're part of a large organization and you have a really good idea of how to give back to society, if there isn't room or an environment that the corporate sets up for you to be able to voice your ideas, then I think that's where things fail. So I believe it's 50-50. When I say 50-50, I mean that the corporates need to have the agenda. That needs to exist. There needs to be room for ideas to go into the strategy. There needs to be someone who understands what it means for an employee to come and say, I have an idea, how can we give to this charity? Or I have an idea about an initiative. And at the same time, I do think that if you're in a position of leadership in an organization, you need to also put yourself in the shoes of an employee. Don't forget where you started from, and come up with those ideas yourself, and don't expect others to do that work. So I have a very equal view of that. I think everybody has the same responsibility. Just some are going to be able to have the approval, the approval ability, or the budget signing off ability. So we all play a part. We absolutely all play a part.
Right. One final question. One piece of advice for the listeners of Sustainability Explored, because I know I could be talking to you where, as I said in the beginning of our conversation, of our pre-conversation, we are very much similar in our approaches and the philosophical take on sustainability and corporate social responsibility. So I could talk to you hours on end, but time is time, and I promised you not more than half an hour. So one piece of advice, if you could share with the listeners, keeping in mind that we are about sustainability, how to make an impact, where to start, maybe what do you feel like sharing right now?
My advice would always be, start where you are at. Do not get discouraged by my organization doesn't have that, or my neighborhood doesn't do that, or the local council or the local government doesn't do that. Start where you are now. Look at what tools you have within you that where you can give back. If the reality is that you're restricted by time or distance, whatever happens, be creative. We live in a digital world right now where there are a number of different groups and associations that are constantly asking for support. I personally don't have the capacity to go out and do mentoring face-to-face as regularly as I would like to. So what I did is, and this is just one example, and I'm very, very happy about it. I approached an organization that offers the opportunity to volunteer by giving your time mentoring certain individuals virtually, and you never have to meet them face to face if you don't have the capacity. And the social enterprise that I also represent as Director of Impact offers precisely that, because we realize that we need to approach the virtual life, the digital world that we live in, and the virtual life that we have, in a more corporate and social impact responsibility manner, if you like. So be creative, find ways that fit in within your lifestyle, but don't forget that if you don't do it, nobody's going to come and knock at the door and say, can you do it? So it's within us. Just let it happen, and don't get held back by the things that are not happening the way you want them to happen. If you keep pushing, they will happen. We have seen change in sustainability and corporate responsibility over the last 10 years, and more is coming.
Super. I'm very pleased to hear these encouraging words to sum up boldness, courage, and attacking. Like, you have to be a little bit even dangerous with yourself to approach sustainability in a sustainable manner. Thank you very much, Giovanna, for your time, for sharing your words of wisdom, and happy to stay in touch with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for the listeners as well.
Ciao. If you like this episode, if you learned something new today, I invite you to check other episodes out too. In particular, in the episode number 3, I talked about corporate sustainability. In the episode number 4, for example, corporate environmental and social policy and how to draft one, what to include if you want this policy work for your corporation. The episode number 5 is another episode related to the one you've just heard on the stakeholders engagement, where I share my own practical, from the experience, hands-on tips and tricks on the stakeholders engagement in green corporation or organization. In the episode number 7, corporate social responsibility, is it the new norm today, or is it the luxury, as we just discussed with Giovanna? So at least 4 episodes, 3, 4, 5, and 7 on this channel, Sustainability Explored, are for you to check out if you are interested. If you like the podcast in general, don't forget to subscribe not to miss any new episodes that are out every Thursday. Share, review, and rate on the platform you're listening on. We're now available on more than 30 platforms, 37 or 38 if I'm not mistaken. This will help other people discover the podcast and learn something new about sustainability and probably set them on the right path towards sustainable development. If you have any questions for me or for Giovanna, please reach out to me or her on LinkedIn. Thank you very much for listening, for being with us today, and until next time, next Thursday. Until then, take care, especially at these troubled times, and stay sustainable. Goodbye.